I gifted my daughter a house as a wedding present, imagining that her engagement would be something to celebrate, elegant, joyful, everything a mother could wish for. But before the ceremony even took place, that supposed fiancé showed up with his entire family, parents, brother, sister-in-law, moving into the house as if they owned it. The first thing they said was, "We'll take the master bedroom. She can handle all the household chores." I thought it would be a wedding, but apparently they saw my daughter as nothing more than a maid. But they didn't count on one thing. They bragged too early and realized too late that my daughter is nobody's stepping stone, and in the blink of an eye, we made sure they learned that lesson. His family was another story: no house, no car, no financial contribution to the wedding. The parents lived in a remote small town working as farmers. The brother and sister-in-law barely supported themselves with odd jobs in the city. Thomas and I had doubts about this relationship from the beginning, but Natalie was in love, deeply, stubbornly, hopelessly in love. She begged us, convinced us, insisted until we finally gave in. Wanting to ensure she wouldn't face difficulties after marriage, we gifted Natalie a beautiful house in the suburbs of Atlanta, an independent residence completely renovated down to the last detail. Thomas personally supervised everything, investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in custom designs, carefully selected finishes, and the best contractor's money could buy. When the renovation was finished, he was so excited that he practically dragged me to see the final result. But before we entered, a shrill voice echoed through the house. "My God, this neighborhood looks like a prison. All the houses have closed gates. How am I going to visit the neighbors if nobody leaves their doors open? Kyle, go tell them to be more friendly and stop locking everything up. And this front gate, what is this? It looks like a fortress with bars, so reinforced it seems like we're guarding a bank. What happens when our relatives come to visit? They'll have to wait outside like beggars. Kyle, call some contractors and tear down this ridiculous thing." I didn't need to see to know. It was Kyle's mother, Sandra, an unbearable woman. A slow anger began to grow in my chest. Kyle hadn't contributed anything to this wedding: no house, no car, not even an engagement ring. Natalie discreetly bought a ring for him, so we wouldn't notice his lack of initiative. Instead of gratitude or shame, they mocked her, calling her wasteful. A ring, they said, was just a formality. Why throw money away on something so unnecessary? And now, standing there at the entrance of that house, our house, listening to that woman complain as if she were inspecting a roadside motel, I felt my patience run out. Natalie, always conciliatory, tried to keep calm. "Mr. John, Sandra, there's an incredible community center around here. If you want company, they have game nights, social events, many opportunities to meet people." Sandra wrinkled her nose. "Card games, please. Do you think we don't know how to play cards?" Then, as if we were invisible, Kyle's parents went out to explore, examining the rooms, inspecting the furniture, acting as if they already owned the place. Not a word of greeting, not a glance in our direction. Natalie was paralyzed, torn between courtesy and disbelief. Even Thomas, normally the calmest, seemed completely stunned. Noticing my dark expression, Kyle rushed to me, whispering, "Mr. Thomas, Claire, I know my parents can be animated. They just talk loud, that's all. But please, I promise they love Natalie." Before I could respond, a loud, thunderous laugh came from the master bedroom. It was John's voice. What a wonderful room. For a split second, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they would finally appreciate what we had done for Natalie. But then I held my breath. There was Sandra sprawled on the new bed, as if it were hers, with her legs crossed and shoes still on her feet. The white, starched sheets were already stained with dirt from the soles of her worn sneakers. Next to her, John was calmly lighting a cigarette inside my daughter's new house. Before I could speak, he pressed the lit tip against the wooden nightstand, extinguishing the cigarette as if it were an old ashtray. A dark, charred mark immediately appeared on the polished surface. Thomas's jaw contracted, so hard I thought he would break a tooth. Natalie, visibly embarrassed, nudged Kyle, silently begging him to intervene. But he just lowered his head, shoulders hunched, looking like a scolded child. No words, no defense. And then, as if the audacity wasn't already at its peak, John stretched his arms, let out a satisfied sigh, and said, "This room is perfect. Lots of natural light, a spectacular view. We'll keep this one." I almost swore out loud. For a moment, I thought I had heard wrong. Maybe my ears were deceiving me. But no, they had just entered my daughter's house, taken a look, and decided to take the master bedroom. Thomas, Natalie, and I were paralyzed, too stunned to speak. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was an invasion. John left the master bedroom, barely noticing us, and went to one of the smaller rooms. He looked at the space, nodded with apparent satisfaction, and said, "This one here is perfect, ideal for our grandson." He turned to Kyle without hesitating. "Call your brother and tell him to cancel the lease. He and Jessica should move in with Luke immediately." And as if the matter were settled, he continued, "We'll put the house in Tyler's name so Luke will have a stable home when he starts school. As for you and Natalie, you can come back to live here when you have children. Until then, no rush." I felt my patience run out. I opened my mouth to speak, but Thomas grabbed my wrist and made a slight shake of his head. He wanted to see if our daughter could handle this alone. If she didn't set boundaries now, what future would she have with this family? I exhaled sharply and turned my attention back to Kyle. The young man who had always seemed polite, eloquent, and respectful in our presence was standing there with his head down, back hunched, without saying a word. A puppet without strings. Natalie, however, had reached her limit. Her voice became cold. "This house was a gift from my parents. It's not a boarding house for your entire family. Don't you think you're crossing the line?" The room became tense. John's expression darkened. A puff of smoke came aggressively from his nose, and his voice became higher. "Your house?" He gestured with his hand. "Do you really think this place is yours? It's my son's house, which means it's ours. And you have the audacity to speak like that to your future father-in-law before you're even married? What do you intend to do? Kick us out when you have a ring on your finger?" He let his gaze wander around the room and mocked. "Tyler keeps spending on rent every month. This house is huge. It's a shame to waste so much space. Why shouldn't they move in?" Sandra immediately intervened, her voice getting shriller. "I understand, really, it's your wedding house, but frankly, isn't it a bit ridiculous for two people to live in a mansion like this?" She pointed to the smaller room. "What's the problem if Luke stays here? You don't even have children yet. Why leave such a perfect room empty?" And as if it were a great act of generosity, she added, "We don't want to take advantage of you, dear. We just don't want them to struggle alone. We came to help support. You should be grateful." And then, as if realizing how icy our expressions had become, she turned her attention to Natalie and smiled. "Besides, you're about to be my daughter-in-law. It's fair that you take care of us. Cook, clean. You're responsible for keeping us comfortable. Don't you dare be lazy just because you're the bride." My fingers closed into fists. Natalie's hands were shaking at her sides, her breathing was quick and gasping, and still Sandra wasn't finished. "Frankly, looking at you, I can see you're not much of a housekeeper. Why don't you save yourself the trouble and ask your father to hire a maid to take care of us?" Natalie's body stiffened, tears welled up in her eyes, but instead of falling, they burned with fury. And then finally she exploded. "If you want a house in the city, if you want someone to take care of you, pay for it." John was left speechless. "This is the woman you're going to marry? She talks as if we were beggars. Since when is your family's money more important than ours? A marriage is about sharing everything. Doesn't she understand that?" Kyle's face paled. His voice sounded alarmed. "Natalie, you can't say these things. Apologize to my parents." Natalie's sharp gaze turned to him, her voice cold as steel. "Kyle, if you really believe that, take your parents and get out of my house. My parents bought this for me, not for you or them." Kyle's hand reached out, grabbing her wrist. "Natalie, come on, you always make these scenes and I always let it pass. But couldn't you show a little respect to my parents?" Natalie pulled her arm away forcefully, turning her back on them completely. Sandra let out a bitter laugh. "You should be grateful to marry a man like Kyle. Do you think you're too good for us? Look at you, selfish, spoiled, a complete lack of respect. Frankly, I don't think you're good enough for my son." She turned to Kyle with flashing eyes. "Are you seeing now? She looks down on us like all these city people. Natalie stared at her, her voice firm. We're not even married yet, and you're already trying to take what doesn't belong to you. This isn't family, this is greed. Kyle ran his hand over his forehead, his face tense. Natalie, that was way out of line. You need to apologize. John stepped forward, exhaling smoke in our direction. His gaze fell on Thomas and me with a mocking voice. Thomas, I have to ask, how exactly did you raise your daughter? Because I see a serious lack of discipline here. No respect, no humility. It's exhausting to hear my house all the time. He took another drag of his cigarette and exhaled slowly. You wouldn't be looking down on us country folks, would you? He narrowed his eyes, adding almost lazily. You know, Kyle didn't become like this on his own. He had to be disciplined as a child, firm love, real upbringing. That's why he's polite, hardworking, humble. That's why he has a future in the city. He smiled a sharp smile without humor. When your daughter marries us, she'll also learn her place. Kyle will teach her how to behave. He'll make sure of that. Kyle froze beside him in silence and then nodded. A small, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. We all saw it. And in that moment, something in Natalie's eyes changed. Thomas looked at the situation completely stunned. In all his years, he had never met such a shameless, disgraceful family. I couldn't take it anymore. Anger rose to my head and I let it explode. How we raised our daughter is none of your business, and you have the audacity to lecture us. I advanced, my voice firm. You couldn't pay a penny for the wedding. You don't have a house. You don't have a car. You didn't contribute absolutely anything to this engagement, and now you have the courage to act as if this house were yours. I looked at Kyle angrily. Your son, what exactly does he bring besides obedience? He depends on us for everything. So tell me, where does the right to make demands come from? The family stood there momentarily stunned, as if no one had ever dared to put them in their place. Then, after a moment, John lost his composure. Enough? Are you done talking? So what if we don't have money? Your daughter wasn't exactly hard to win over. She practically threw herself into Kyle's arms. His tone became mocking, his smile sharp and petty. Don't you think we know why? She's already past her prime. If she were really worth anything, you wouldn't need to bribe a man to marry her with a house and gifts. Let's be honest, you knew she didn't have better options. Natalie's body stiffened, her hands clenched into fists, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. I knew what she was thinking. For years, she had dealt with Kyle's insecurity, never flaunted our family's wealth, never bought luxury items in front of him. Every dinner, every date, every trip to the movies, she paid, pretending it was nothing. And yet, there they were, turning her kindness into desperation. Natalie took a deep breath, trembling, and then her voice echoed in the room, calm and firm. Mom, Dad, I'm not going to marry him. Thomas and I turned to her. Her gaze was clear, her voice decided, I'm serious. She looked at Kyle, then at us. You were right. We come from completely different worlds, and this would never work. I knew it wasn't an impulsive decision. She saw the truth, the real truth, not the illusion of love she had clung to. We felt it too, how their relationship had been deteriorating for months, but today, that moment was the last straw. Sandra wasn't willing to surrender. She let out a cold laugh. Please, don't play the victim. Even if you cancel the wedding, my son will never want you again, Natalie. She didn't even look at Sandra. She turned to Kyle with a voice harsh as ice. Take your parents and leave. It's over. Kyle panicked, grabbing her wrist. Nat, come on, don't do this. Don't be so stubborn. She pulled her arm away as if his touch burned her. Don't touch me. John let out a mocking laugh. Look at you, Kyle, pathetic. She's not even your wife yet, and you can't control her. If you let this pass, she'll walk all over you for the rest of your life. His voice became mocking. Are you a man or what? And that was the breaking point. I lost my words, grabbed the glass on the table, and threw it on the floor with force. The crash echoed through the house, leaving an unsettling silence. Then Thomas moved with a roar of pure fury. He lunged forward and gave John a solid punch to the face. The blow made John stagger backward, hitting the wall before collapsing to the floor, choking on his own breath. A dark red bruise already covered his cheek. Sandra screamed, "You're crazy. This is assault." Thomas stood over him with a low, threatening voice. "Say one more word, and you won't leave this house." Kyle was paralyzed, his face pale as a ghost. He didn't dare move. I stepped forward. For the first time, Kyle seemed scared, his voice trembling. "I only said that because you were disrespecting my parents. If she apologizes, maybe we can forget all this." Before he finished, Thomas's palm struck his face. The force made him stagger to the floor. A bright red mark bloomed on his cheek. He sat there stunned, eyes wide with disbelief. "Bastard," Thomas growled. "That was for Natalie. That was for every word you let them say about her." Kyle stumbled backward, breathing heavily with the air of a cornered rat. John, still dazed, began to get up, but when Thomas turned to him, he paled. "If you touch me again, I'll call the police. You'll go to jail for this." Thomas grabbed him by the collar, lifting him completely off the ground. "Shut up." John struggled, his legs kicking uncontrollably, his shoes falling off. "Let me go, you psychopath." Thomas approached with a cutting voice. "Now I see you as you really are. Even if Natalie wanted to marry someone from your family, I would never allow it." John trembled, his bravado completely destroyed. Thomas squeezed tighter. "My daughter is intelligent, beautiful, and capable. She doesn't need your son. In fact, she's too good for him." His voice lowered dangerously. "You couldn't pay for a wedding, couldn't buy a house, and the moment you entered here, you disrespected us, left dirt on our floors, smoked in our rooms, and acted as if we owed you something. So let me clarify." He pushed John backward, letting him fall to the floor like a discarded rag. "We're not going to give you anything. Now get out of my house." John, trembling, nodded. Thomas threw his shoe at him. "Take this and go." He jumped up, almost tripping over himself as he ran to the door. I crossed my arms, smiling with satisfaction. "Look at that." He ran and left his wife and son behind. Sandra, still stunned, grabbed Kyle's arm and dragged him to the exit. At the door, she couldn't resist one last jab. "You'll regret this." Kyle could have any woman he wanted. Girls would line up for him. "Your daughter will end up alone." I stepped forward and she ran off. As they went down the stairs hurriedly, one of them must have tripped because all three fell rolling down the steps, flailing arms and legs. The sounds and groans echoed through the entrance. Thomas sighed, shaking his head as he watched them groaning on the ground. They deserved it. I thought that once Natalie broke up with Kyle, she would finally be free of that family's absurdities and move on. But clearly, I underestimated how far they were willing to go. That night, when Natalie came home from work, she was visibly shaken. She didn't say a word, just came in and put down her bag with a deep sigh. I frowned. "What happened?" Without saying anything, she handed me her phone. Kyle had contacted her by email. Natalie had blocked him on all platforms, calls, messages, social media. But somehow he found a way back into her life. Thomas and I leaned in to read the email. The subject was simple. "Natalie, since we broke up, it's fair that you pay me what you owe me." Thomas raised his eyebrows. "You borrowed money from him?" Natalie gave a dry laugh without humor. "Check the attachment." We clicked on the file and my blood pressure almost doubled. It was a spreadsheet, a meticulously organized list of every dollar he had spent on her during the relationship. Tuesday Starbucks, 2 coffees, $18.20. Valentine's Day flowers, $45. Uber ride last weekend, $14. Birthday gift card, $200. Dinners out 12 times. Total split equally. Line after line, perfectly organized, tracking an entire year of expenses as if it were an investment from which he wanted a return. And at the end, in total, $2,897.36. I'll be generous. Pay me just $897 and we'll be even. Thomas and I looked at the screen speechless. I felt heat rising to my face. I clenched my fists. This man had no shame. He really thought we didn't know the truth. In almost every dinner, movie, or trip they took, Natalie was the one who paid. Kyle invited us to dinner exactly once, and it was at a fast food joint. On his birthday, Natalie bought him the latest iPhone, spending more than $5,000. On hers, she received a $200 gift card. Last year, When his father had a health problem, I was the one who went to the hospital with the gift, but now he wanted to charge her. The audacity. And to complete it, the email ended with a veiled threat. If you don't pay, I'll have no choice but to go to your workplace and resolve this personally. Resolve what exactly? This wasn't just absurd, it was pathetic. The moment the elevator doors opened, I immediately knew something was wrong. A crowd was gathering in the lobby, murmuring and pointing toward the entrance. The air vibrated with expectation, as if people were watching a spectacle. And in the center of it all, Kyle and his parents. Kyle was huddled in a corner, head down, as if trying to disappear. But his parents were shouting as if they were leading a street protest. Sandra's shrill voice echoed, "Where's the supervisor? I want to speak to the manager. We're here because of Natalie. She owes money to my son and refuses to pay." The gathered employees exchanged perplexed glances, whispering among themselves. More people arrived, attracted by the commotion. Then, the moment Natalie and I got off the elevator, the entire floor fell silent. All eyes turned to us. Sandra, seeing Natalie, immediately pointed her finger and raised her voice another octave. "Listen, everyone. This woman, your co-worker, dated my son for an entire year, spent his money, took advantage of his generosity, and now that they've broken up, she thinks she can leave without paying. Tell me, is this fair?" The whispers resumed, louder. "Wait, is it true? I thought she came from a rich family. Isn't her father an executive at Granito Group? What if this is all a facade?" Natalie's face turned red. I felt her shoulders tremble. She had never been in a situation like this. Humiliated in public, treated like a scammer. She had always been serene, professional, respected, and now, in an instant, Kyle's family had reduced her to a spectacle. I stepped forward, placing my hand gently on her back. "Calm down, I'll handle this." I straightened my shoulders, crossed my arms, and fixed my gaze on Sandra. The moment I entered, her arrogance wavered. They had already felt Thomas's fury once. They knew what we were capable of. Still, Sandra struggled, trying to save her performance. "We just want what's fair. Your daughter owes money to my son, and we're here to collect." I raised an eyebrow, my voice cold and cutting. Since we're making a public scene, how much exactly does she owe?" Sandra hesitated for half a second, then straightened up. "A lot of money." "How much exactly?" I pressed. She trembled slightly, but then shouted, $897.36. The room froze, a moment of absolute silence followed by an explosion of laughter. "Wait, what? All the circus for less than $900. I thought she owed hundreds of thousands. And she said 36 cents. Who calculates like that?" The whispers turned into total mockery. Sandra's expression wavered, but John intervened, determined to save the family's dignity. He extended his hand and pulled out a huge poster, holding it like a protest banner. "Here's the complete list of all the expenses my son paid. Her coffees, movie tickets, dinners. Look at the numbers." He began reading the transactions, his voice echoing as if he were presenting a corporate report. But the more he spoke, the more the crowd reacted. "Wow, he's detailing every coffee. Valentine's Day flowers for $45? Are you kidding me? None of my exes, not even the cheapest, were so petty. This isn't budgeting. This is psychopath behavior." Kyle murmured something quietly. I was just keeping track for financial planning. It wasn't being petty. This only intensified the laughter. I knew it was my moment. I stepped forward, keeping my voice loud and clear. "Well, since you're demanding payment, let's do this right." I took out my checkbook. The room fell silent. With deliberate slowness, I wrote a check for $897.36, making sure everyone saw the amount. Then, with a casual gesture, I threw the check to Kyle. It flew through the air and fell at his feet. "There, down to the last cent you say we owe you. Paid in full." Gasps of astonishment ran through the crowd. Sandra lunged at the check, grabbing it as if it were a victory, until I smiled. "Now, Kyle," I said, dragging out the words with a cutting voice, "since we're settling debts, let's talk about what you owe Natalie." Kyle froze. His face lost color. He knew exactly what I was talking about, and the moment I said it, the crowd understood too. Sandra screamed with a shrill, desperate voice, "What money? What nonsense!" I let out a cold laugh. Seriously? Let's review the numbers then. I looked her in the eyes, imperturbable. On Kyle's birthday, my daughter bought him a new phone, $5,000. When his father got sick, I personally took a gift. I have the receipts here. I took out my phone and touched the screen, and these are just the expenses we can prove. That's already more than $6,000, not counting all the other daily expenses we didn't track. I turned to the crowd, raising my voice. Tell me, shouldn't he return this money? The response was immediate. Of course he should. That's much more than they're charging. What hypocrisy. The chorus of support was deafening, and the family trembled, their faces pale and rigid. Sandra, still clinging to the remnants of dignity, huffed. You're making up lies, slander. It was then that Natalie finally stepped forward. Her patience had run out. If you don't want to acknowledge the truth, fine. Let's take this to another level. Her voice was firm and sharp. She turned to Kyle. How about we go to your office, stop in front of your company, and display this for your colleagues to see? Would you like that, Kyle? His face went white instantly. His company was just 2 floors above ours. There was no escape. Sandra's face contorted with fury. You ungrateful. And then she lunged forward, raising her hand toward Natalie's face. This time I was ready. The moment she moved, I stepped forward, placing myself between them. My voice was low, calm, and firm. You'd better lower that hand. A cold silence took over the room. Sandra's arm was paralyzed in the air, her face rigid and stunned. I didn't blink, didn't hesitate. I just stared at her. And then, slowly, I shifted my gaze to Kyle. You came here to make a scene, but all you managed to do was destroy what little dignity you still had. Kyle looked at the floor in silence, defeated. I took a deep breath and turned to the gathered employees. But instead of speaking to them, I addressed Natalie. Let's take this to his company's management and deal with this professionally. No shouting, no threats, just action. Without saying another word, we turned and walked to the elevator. We didn't look back. It wasn't necessary. The damage was already done. The supervisor arrived quickly, his expression polite but confused. Can you tell me what's happening? He asked, looking at us and the growing crowd. I showed Kyle's email, the one he had sent so audaciously demanding money. I summarized the situation calmly. We're not here to argue. My voice was firm and unshakable. We just want a fair resolution. The supervisor read the email quickly, frowning even more as I explained. Then an assistant approached and whispered something in his ear. His eyes turned to me and his behavior changed almost instantly. Excuse me, are you Mrs. Claire from Granito Group? I nodded, offering a serene smile. I am. Immediately his posture straightened. His tone became formally courteous. I deeply regret that this situation has reached this point. Our company takes professionalism and ethics very seriously. I'll speak with Kyle privately to address this. He turned to Kyle, hardening his tone. Kyle, I'm really disappointed. Keeping detailed records of personal expenses, demanding reimbursement after a breakup, and causing public turmoil in front of another company's office. This is completely inappropriate. Kyle's face paled. He opened his mouth looking for an excuse. I didn't think it would become this. I was just... The supervisor interrupted him. You not only embarrassed yourself, but also damaged this company's image. This will be reported to HR. Kyle visibly shrank, head down, hands wringing. I thanked the supervisor courteously. Done. I turned to Natalie, let's go. But just as we took a step, Sandra's shrill voice cut through the air. This isn't over. I paused, then slowly turned, staring at her with a calm, firm look. I didn't need to say anything. At that moment, everyone knew who had won. A few weeks passed, and life seemed to return to normal. Natalie resumed her routine. Work, coffee with friends, yoga classes on weekends. She seemed better, lighter, without the weight of past stress. Thomas and I had a tacit agreement not to mention Kyle, or anything that had happened. We didn't want to reopen wounds still healing. She was fine, at least in front of us, always making an effort to appear in order. Until that night, Natalie arrived with takeout food in hand, but something in her expression was wrong. I glanced sideways as she arranged the containers. "Everything okay at work?" I asked in a casual tone. She hesitated, then without saying anything, handed me her phone. He had tried again. The screen showed a text from an unknown number, but the words were painfully familiar. "Natalie, lately I've been thinking a lot. I know I made mistakes. I shouldn't have listened to my parents or taken my frustration out on you. I have nothing left, but I want to start over. Give me another chance." I exhaled, looking at her. "This is the third one, isn't it?" Her voice was low. I didn't respond. I nodded. Silence is the best answer. She sighed. "It's just that I don't understand. Does he really feel this, or does he just hate losing?" "Probably both," I said calmly, "but that's not your problem anymore. His growth isn't your responsibility." She looked out the window in silence. I knew her heart wasn't wavering. It wasn't love. It was habit, the emotional residue of investing so much in someone only to realize it was never worth it. Days later, things took another turn. That night, Natalie came in with a different expression. Not sadness, but something colder, sharper. She put her phone on the counter. "Mom, look at this." I picked up the device and my stomach churned. It was a social media post, an anonymous message with a blurred photo and video clips carefully edited to create a false narrative. The title was cruel. A real gold digger extorted her ex after the breakup and bragged about her rich family. I guess she's not so untouchable after all. A slow anger formed in my chest. "Do we need to guess who did this?" She shook her head. "I can't track the account, but look at my content, these photos, these videos, everything is from Kyle. He cut himself out of the images, used an anonymous account, but we both know." I clenched my jaw. So now he resorts to this. Natalie let out a slow sigh, exhaustion taking over. I just wanted to move on. "Why won't he let me?" I took her hand and squeezed it firmly. "Because he's not obsessed with you, but with his own ego. He doesn't know how to move forward, so he only knows how to drag others back." That same night, I contacted an old college friend, now a lawyer at a renowned firm. The next morning, we issued a legal notice demanding the removal of the anonymous defamatory content, along with a request to preserve the author's information for possible legal action. We also filed a civil harassment complaint, ensuring an official record of Kyle's actions. For now, things seemed to calm down, but Kyle wasn't finished. A week later, Natalie received a package in the mail. Inside was a handwritten letter from Kyle. The tone distilled regret, guilt, and nostalgia. He wrote about their first date, her smile, the night she took care of his sick father, each line carefully crafted to move her. But the last sentences revealed the truth. "I can't accept that you're leaving for good. You know I have nothing left. You were my only light. If you don't come back, I don't know what I'll do." It wasn't an apology, it was emotional blackmail. My expression darkened as I read the last words. Without hesitating, I called our lawyer and started the process for a restraining order. That afternoon, Natalie and I went to the courthouse together. She sat on a bench, holding the letter so tightly her fingers turned white. "Mom," her voice was low and tense, "I know I'm handling this well, but why is it still so exhausting?" I put my hand on her shoulder. "You're not tired, you're recovering. This takes time, but you're doing everything right." She exhaled slowly, meeting my gaze for the first time. There was no hesitation in her eyes. "I won't let him hurt me again." I smiled. "That's my daughter." Weeks later, the court officially approved the temporary restraining order, prohibiting Kyle from contacting or approaching Natalie in any way. We also provided all evidence to Granito's legal team, ensuring everything was recorded for future problems. This time we didn't wait for apologies. We didn't give him a single chance to reappear in our lives. Natalie was finally free. She was no longer the girl who stayed silent for others' emotions. She was no longer the fiancé who gave in, apologized, or tried to fix someone who refused to change. She had fully entered her own life, and without realizing it, began to surpass the limits she had once imposed on herself. She dove into work without letting emotions derail her focus. Instead of hesitating, she took on multiple projects simultaneously, showing her ability to thrive under pressure. She knew what she wanted and, more importantly, what she no longer needed. Then came the regional business conference. Granito chose her to represent the company at an important industry networking event. She took the stage with authority, delivering a presentation with confidence and precision. The audience, executives, investors, industry leaders, listened, nodded in approval, and at the end, several representatives from companies across the country approached, eager to exchange business cards and explore future collaborations. This event subtly but irreversibly changed the course of her career, and with it, her life. At an informal networking lunch after the conference, Natalie met Ian Peterson. Ian was one of the co-founders of Coastal Capital, a Georgia Tech graduate and member of a well-known entrepreneurial family from Charleston. But unlike the arrogance associated with privilege, he was thoughtful, eloquent, and serene. Their conversation was brief, no small talk or intentional contact exchanges, just a natural, spontaneous conversation before both went their separate ways. But the following week, Natalie received a handwritten letter. It wasn't a grand declaration or an enthusiastic invitation. It was a sincere note acknowledging the strength of her presentation and offering valuable comments on her business model. Additionally, it included a book on leadership and strategy, something he thought might interest her. Natalie was surprised, even impressed. I looked at the letter and smiled ironically. Well, at least he didn't send a bill after the breakup. Natalie laughed quietly, but didn't respond. Still, there was something different in her expression, a serenity that hadn't existed before. There were no sudden romances or rushed advances. Over time, their conversations became more frequent but never forced. They exchanged industry knowledge, participated in small business forums, and occasionally had coffee to discuss market trends. Until one night, Ian drove her home and suddenly stopped the car, turned to her and said, "I don't know how you feel about me." His voice was firm and sincere. "But I want you to know that I like you, not because of your work, not because you're brilliant or independent, but because when I'm with you, I feel like life is worth living fully." Natalie was paralyzed for an instant. She didn't expect that moment, not so soon, not so direct. She was silent, weighing her words. Then finally she nodded. "I don't know what the future holds," she admitted in a low voice, "but I'd like to find out." For the first time, she entered a relationship without fear, without pretenses, without hesitations. To our surprise, Ian soon introduced her to his parents. Mr. Antonio and Mrs. Laura were kind, intelligent, and welcoming. They never interfered in personal matters, never judged or inspected. Instead, they treated Natalie with the same respect they would give any capable adult. At dinner, Mrs. Laura personally prepared a dessert and smiled warmly. "It's the first time Ian has brought someone home. I had to do my best." Later, Mr. Antonio pulled Thomas aside and said quietly, "She's extraordinary, intelligent, balanced, knows what she wants." We're happy Ian met her. There were no demands or pressure, just a family that valued genuine connection and mutual respect. It was everything Kyle's family never was. But good things rarely go unnoticed. One afternoon, a photo appeared online, a spontaneous image of Natalie and Ian at a business event. The Peterson surname didn't take long to circulate in industry circles, and soon the news reached Kyle. That night, Natalie left the office and found Kyle waiting near the entrance. His face was pale, his expression contorted. "So this is it?" He took a step closer, his voice low and resentful. "You left me and ran straight into another man's arms." Natalie didn't waver. She stared at him directly. "Kyle, go away. You have no right to question me." His nostrils flared. "You were planning this all along, weren't you? You were already with him while you were still with me." Her voice hardened. "You need to stop. I have a restraining order against you. If you continue, I'll call the police right now." Kyle's face contorted, his hands clenched at his sides. He was about to retort when another presence emerged from the parking lot. Ian approached, his posture calm, his expression contained, but his presence changed the atmosphere. He stood beside Natalie, his voice tranquil but firm. "I don't know who you are, but if you take one more step toward her, I'll call the police myself." Kyle blinked, startled. He hadn't noticed Ian's arrival, and certainly didn't expect this confrontation. "You're the new boyfriend, aren't you?" His voice became mocking, but there was a crack in his bravado. "Think you're better than me?" Ian didn't take the bait. "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you understand you can't hurt her anymore." There were no shouts or a dramatic confrontation, but the weight of his words suffocated Kyle more than any fight. For an instant, he stood there looking at them, Natalie upright, immune to his anger. Ian beside her, firm and unshakable. Something broke inside him. He finally understood. The woman he had criticized, belittled, and tried to control was now in a different world, bathed in a light he would never reach. And he didn't even have the right to stand beside her anymore. As they walked away, Kyle stood paralyzed, his face unreadable, a storm of anger, regret, and finality. But the world moved on without him, and Natalie never looked back. After dinner, Natalie and I walked along a narrow trail, our steps slow and measured. The gravel crunched softly under our feet, and behind us, trees swayed in the evening breeze, their shadows dancing on the ground. It was a place we visited often when she was a child. Natalie loved jumping on the smooth stones by the lake's edge, and my heart would race every time she wobbled on the shore. I would extend my hand, holding the sleeve of her jacket, trying to keep her balanced. Now her steps were firm, measured, her gaze clear and resolute. "Remember how I used to run to the water to get stones?" she asked suddenly. I smiled, of course. "You always said each one was the only one you needed. You'd take them all home and wash them carefully." She laughed softly. "Back then, I thought it was worth keeping every little detail of the world." She paused thoughtfully. "Now I know some things are meant to stay in the heart, not in life." I turned to look at her. She was no longer the girl who panicked when things went wrong. "Mom," she continued, her voice lower, "what do you think people chase their whole lives?" I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked at the water where sunlight reflected in gentle, shifting waves. "I think it's different for each person, but for me, it's peace." She nodded. "Peace. That's something you build, not something you win. And it's not something that comes overnight." She was silent for a while, absorbing my words. Then, with a voice soft as the afternoon breeze, she said, "Before, I thought I needed to be loved to feel like my life made sense. But now I think learning to love myself is the most important thing." I smiled. "That's more than enough." She smiled back. "You always knew, didn't you?" I didn't answer, just held her gaze. In that moment, I knew she no longer needed my protection. She had learned to stand against the wind, to listen to the water, to hear the voices of the world, and decide for herself which ones mattered. We continued walking side by side along the lake shore. In the distance, some ducks floated lazily on the water, their movements creating gentle waves, one after another. And suddenly I understood this path. We had walked it countless times before. The difference was that back then, she always turned to me to find direction. Now she could walk alone, but from time to time, she still chose to hold her mother's hand. And that was enough. I am Natalie, and I once truly believed that love could overcome everything. When I met Kyle, he was quiet, reserved, with a seriousness that made him seem more mature than the other guys around him. I confused that restraint with depth, his frugality with a practical approach to life. Even when my friends gently warned me that he was stingy, I dismissed it as harsh judgment. The first time he invited me to dinner, it was at a fast food restaurant. He ordered the cheapest item on the menu and said, "Don't order too much. It's wasteful." I smiled, said it was fine, and convinced myself he just valued practicality. He never gave gifts. On Valentine's Day, he sent me $45 via digital transfer, joking that intention is what counts. And I, God help me, found it charming, a minimalist, mature romance. It took me a long time to realize that his supposed practicality was just disguised greed. On his birthday, I bought him a new iPhone. On mine, I received a $200 gift card, with him telling me to buy something nice and seriously adding that couples should measure love with money. And I, like a fool, agreed. He didn't have a car, so I drove. He didn't have a house, so I said it didn't matter. He said he couldn't buy a ring yet, so I secretly chose one, asked my best friend to buy it, so I could surprise him on our wedding day. Now, looking back, I can't believe how blind I was. And that was just the beginning. The first time I visited his house, his mother barely looked at me before asking coldly, "Do you cook?" Before I could answer, she added, "City girls have no place in the kitchen, but I'll tell you one thing, this won't work in our family." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, and said, "I can cook and would love to learn more." She didn't smile, just huffed as if something had been confirmed. I thought if I was kind and sincere enough, she would eventually accept me. I didn't realize that was just the beginning of her endless tests and criticisms. She mocked my clothes, saying I dressed too flashily. She mocked my career, saying a woman who's too ambitious is hard to control. She mocked my personality, saying I wasn't delicate enough to be a good wife. Kyle never defended me. All he would say was, "That's how she is, don't take it personally." At the time, I thought he was keeping the peace. Now I know he was just a coward. His father was even more direct. "You won't have time to work when you start having children. You don't need to waste energy thinking about a career." They believed I shouldn't have ambitions, personal space, or even my own opinions. And I, God help me, told myself to endure it. I thought things would change after the wedding. But the moment that woke me up was the house. Kyle said he couldn't buy one, so I suggested my parents give us one as part of my dowry. He didn't hesitate. He smiled and ran to tell his parents. That's when they showed who they really were. His mother immediately declared, "We'll take the master bedroom. The second room will be for Luke, our grandson, and Tyler and his family will also move in." I tried to be rational, tried to talk. She laughed in my face. "Your mother bought you a big house. How lucky. But that doesn't mean you have a voice here." Kyle stood there in silence. Later, when I confronted him, he pulled me aside and whispered, "She's just talking. Don't take it so seriously." That's when I finally saw it. I was never their daughter-in-law. I was a resource, a house, a wallet, a convenient stranger who could support but never be respected. And the most absurd part, after we broke up, Kyle spread rumors at work, calling me cold, stuck up, and materialistic. Then he had the audacity to send me a spreadsheet listing every coffee, every dinner, every trip he paid for, demanding I return $897. I laughed, really laughed. The same girl who bought her own engagement ring was now being called a gold digger. I transferred the full amount, not because I owed anything, but because I wanted to close that door forever. After that, his life fell apart. He was fired from work. The family's reputation was shaken. Every resume he sent received silence. They said he looked exhausted, miserable, lost. I can't say why. By then, I didn't care anymore. Sometimes I think about the girl I was, the one who stayed silent for love, who sacrificed her boundaries, who kept convincing herself to endure a little more. Yes, it hurts to remember her, but above all, I feel free. Because now I understand a true relationship isn't about one person constantly compensating for the other's flaws. I was never his savior, never his family's financial plan. I walked away and lived better. He was consumed by his own greed, his own selfishness. That's my most silent and dignified revenge, without shouting, without scheming, without even hating. Just living a life he can never touch. This time, I don't bow to anyone. This time, I move forward just for me. If you enjoyed this story, you can subscribe to the channel and like this video. You can support me by sending a super thanks. To hear more stories like this, until next time.